Welcome, everybody. Tonight we have a very interesting topic, although I think every topic we have is interesting. But tonight I think we have a very special topic, and that is, who the devil is Satan? Who the devil is Satan? You probably have heard many people say, well, the devil made me do it. Well, who is this devil? Who is Satan? Is there really such a thing as Satan? Well, I'll tell you, he would love it if you believed that there wasn't. The more people that don't believe in him, the happier he is, because he can work better. It's the opposite of God. God wants people to relate to him and to believe in him, and the more people that do, God can work better. But with Satan, it's different. He likes secrecy. And the more people that don't believe in him, then the better it is for him. He can work. So one thing he hates is the light. He hates it when people talk about him. He hates it when people expose him clearly. So tonight, we're going to talk about this clearly. Who is Satan? Did God create Satan? What is the purpose of Satan? What is he doing? And I just want to advise you to stay awake, because he'll try to put you to sleep. Maybe those that are watching on TV, maybe your TV will start going on the blink in a couple of minutes. So who is Satan? Does Satan really exist? And, well, according to the Bible, he does. There are hundreds of passages that refer to the devil or refer to Satan, this being of evil. But where does Satan exist? Well, one thing that we know about Satan is he's invisible. We can't see him. So a lot of people think, well, you know, people's logic is if he's invisible, therefore it doesn't exist. You know, things that don't exist are invisible, and Satan is invisible, therefore Satan doesn't exist. Well, for that person that thinks like that, I suggest that they put their fingers in the electric socket. Because, you know, electricity is invisible, but it sure does exist. So why is this being Satan, why is he invisible? Why is it that we can't really see him? We can see his works, his expression, but we can't see him directly. And the reason is because this being is dwelling in the spiritual world. The spiritual world. Actually, this is you and I here. This one person. We're dwelling in between the two worlds, in a sense. We have a spirit and a body. And our spirit and body relate. Our spirit is living in the spiritual world. And our body, our physical body, is dwelling in the physical world. Now, I can see you, you can see me, we can have experiences in the physical world because we have 5 physical senses. Now, this spiritual world is the world of mystery, isn't it? It's the world of mystery. And it's mysterious because we can't perceive it so well. And all things associated with the spiritual world are mysterious. For instance, God, people who have died and have gone to this realm, and also other beings of this realm, whether it be angels or whether it be this being that we're talking about, Satan. All beings of this realm seem mysterious and unknown to us. So there's only one of two conclusions. Either this world doesn't exist, or we've lost the means, we've lost the faculties to perceive this world. To perceive this world. And actually, as we've studied in past weeks, we've seen very clearly that man has lost his original role, his original position. And the result of this, man has, in a sense, died spiritually. We are in a spiritual coma, and this means that we've lost our spiritual senses. That's why God is so mysterious. That's why when people die, they disappear. That's why when you talk about Satan, people have some concept of a little red man with horns and a pitchfork. The reason isn't that this world doesn't exist. It's real. It's a very real world. And if just somebody here would die and go there, you would see that it is very real. So the problem is that we've lost our spiritual senses. So we can't perceive so directly the phenomena of this spiritual world. The phenomena of this spiritual world. So, therefore, when we talk about Satan, then a lot of people feel, oh, that's just a myth. And why? Well, because I can't see him. But in fact, Satan is existing. He's not perceivable by the 5 physical senses. He is a spirit being. So where did Satan come from then? A lot of people feel that God has created Satan to test man. God has created this being called Satan to torment man, to find out where you're at in terms of your faith. If you're going to be good or bad. The only way to find out if you're going to be good or bad, right, is to just have some being of evil check you out, to tempt you. So some people think that God created Satan for that purpose, but that's not true. Actually, the Bible shows us clearly in Genesis, in the 1st chapter, the 31st verse. God said, He saw everything that He had made, and behold, it was very good. End of argument. God looked at everything that He had made and said, it's very good. He didn't say, well, most of it's good, but I created a little bit of Satan in here just to get you, to see what you're going to do. He didn't create Satan. God did not create Satan. God did not create this evil world. God's plan was not for strife and war and contradiction and hatred and all the bloodshed that we've seen through history. So where did this evil being Satan come from? You know, if in fact God had created Satan, then it would mean that this evil of Satan would be a part of God's character. But that's impossible. God is only good and only created goodness. So where did Satan come from? There's only one other place where Satan could come from. And that is, Satan must have originally been created as something else. And this being who was created as a good creation left his position, fell to become what we know as Satan. That's the only alternative. That before Satan existed, his character, in other words, his character was transformed from goodness to becoming Satan. That before he was Satan, he was a creation of God with a good character and a good purpose. And actually, if we examine the scripture, we can see that the Bible tells us clearly that this in fact is true. Revelations 12:9 says, the great dragon was cast out, the old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceived the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. So here we see the word angels. Somehow this Satan is been cast out. He's associated with angels. Now, what are angels, by the way? What are angels? It's really funny when you talk about these things that people have attached to mythological beings or a certain concept. In other words, like angels, they have wings, and they have robes, and they play trumpets and harps and this sort of thing. But what is an angel? Actually, if you read the Bible talks about angels many times. And whenever an angel would appear, the angel's appearance was always very low profile. The angel was able to mingle with human beings, and he kept a low profile. For instance, 3 angels came to Abraham in his tent, and they sat out and they shared a meal with Abraham. And it wasn't until the end of this meal that he began to notice, hey, you boys ain't from around these parts, are you? They were angels. There was an angel that appeared to Lot's family in Sodom. And the people around Lot's house, they didn't know he was an angel. They thought he was some man. So angels keep a very low profile. And also angels are able to appear very substantially and to participate in seemingly physical activity. Angels shared a meal with Abraham. I think probably the person that could give the best testimony that angels are real is Jacob. You know, Jacob in the Old Testament, he wrestled an angel, and the angel broke his thigh. Oh my goodness. He'd have no question in his mind about angels being real. So why did God create angels, and what did angels have to do with this being called Satan? Well, angels were created as servants of God. And angels are spiritual beings. And by the way, they don't have wings. They don't have wings. And when they appear very similar to the form of man. So actually, they keep a very low profile. Now, you may think this is funny, but maybe in your life you've met an angel and you didn't know it. Angels are able to manifest in this world in a very substantial way. So not an obvious way with big flappy wings. If a guy was walking down, well, maybe not in New York City, he wouldn't be noticed so much. But in most places, a guy walking down the street with wings, he would really stand out in the crowd, don't you think? But angels are spiritual beings in the very same form as man. And their mission is servants, or as the scripture defines, they're ministering spirits. So God created angels to help man, to help God. Angels in the Bible have served as messengers of God to bring a message. For instance, an angel brought a message to Mary. They inform man of different twists and turns in God's providence. So these angels have a very important role and exist in the spiritual world as spiritual beings without a physical body, but they're able to manifest in this physical world because there is a point of contact between the two worlds, and that is man. Man is the point of contact between the spiritual and physical world. So again, well, what about Satan? What does Satan have to do then with angels? Revelations 12:9 says that this serpent, who's called the devil and Satan, his dwelling place was originally in heaven, and his angels were thrown down with him. So here we can see that Satan's original identity is an angel. He was originally an angel who was thrown down from heaven. So this supports the idea that we express that originally, before Satan was Satan, he was a good being. And in fact, he was an angel in heaven. An angel in heaven. So Satan was thrown down. And also we look in Isaiah 14:12. Isaiah 14:12 clearly defines the identity of Satan to be Lucifer. Lucifer the archangel. So Lucifer was one of the 3 archangels, and Lucifer fell down and his angels fell down with him, and Lucifer's character was transformed in that fall. And this spiritual being, who was Lucifer, then was transformed into Satan. Now, if you've been watching our program, a few weeks ago we talked very clearly about the root of sin, how actually this fall of the archangel took place. But what I want to go into now, as we finish up, is actually how does Satan work? How does Satan work? If we live in this world, many times we feel temptation. When we feel temptation, does that mean that exactly is Satan himself coming to us? Well, if it were, he'd be pretty busy, don't you think? Just running around all the time, tempting people. Well, Satan has agents. And those agents are people who lived a sinful life. People that have lived a sinful life on earth. And then when they go into the spiritual world, then their spirits are connected to Satan. And we call these evil spirits. Evil spirits. This would be Satan. And so the evil spirits are connected to Satan in the spiritual world. And evil spirits are simply people who, when they were living on earth, lived a very evil life, a selfish life, lived a life of self-interest, self-gratification, self-edification, self-justification, self-gratification. People that live their life like that. Now, some of you may be thinking, some of you at home may be, oh my God, that's exactly how I'm living. And if you're thinking that, if you're realizing that, then you better change. Because people who have lived like that, then when they lose their physical body, they go into hell. And that means they become an agent, an evil spirit, who is connected to Satan. And these evil spirits then tempt the spirits of people on earth. Evil spirits tempt the spirits of people on earth. So there's a definite spiritual influence that ultimately connects to Satan. And that spiritual influence is to get you to do evil actions, to do things out of self-interest, to do things out of self-edification, in other words, self-praise or self-pity, to do things out of self-gratification, to do things out of self-justification. There is a definite spiritual influence that ultimately originates with Satan to get you to do those things. And if you do, then Satan is able to maintain his existence. This is the only way that Satan can maintain his existence, and that is if he has hosts. Hosts. Because in fact, evil was not created by God. Therefore, evil is not eternal. It doesn't have an eternal nature. Its nature is actually not to exist because God doesn't have anything to do with it. So the only way Satan can maintain his existence is he needs a base, and that's usually us. So we have to keep a vigilant against this spiritual influence, a certain spiritual influence that I'm sure that in your life, especially if you try to do goodness, you can feel this kind of spiritual influence. So this is why we should pray. We should really try to dedicate ourselves for living for the sake of others. We should really try to dedicate ourselves to a high moral standard and to a life of unselfishness. And if we dedicate ourselves in that direction, coupled with strong prayer, then we have armor against this evil spiritual influence that ultimately links to Satan. So let's take this bit of information and then let's try to advance our life and become more godly in our daily life. Thank you very much, and God bless each one of you.
These are the highlights from Reverend McCarthy's lectures. First, on the reality of Satan. 1. God did not create Satan. Second, the archangel fell from heaven and himself became Satan. 3. Satan is not omnipresent, but rather works through evil spirits.
Welcome, everybody. Well, this is the second week in a row that we're going to talk about sin. I hope I don't lose my audience because of that. But actually, we need to talk about it, don't we? So we can know how to deal with it. So let's read from Romans, and let's see if you can relate to this. St. Paul is talking here. So I find this law at work. When I want to do good, evil is right there with me. For in my inner being, I delight in God's law. But I see another law at work in the members of my body, waging war against the law of my mind, and making me a prisoner of the law of sin at work within my members. What a wretched man I am. Who will rescue me from this body of death? Every time I want to do good, evil is right there with me. Boy, isn't that the truth? How many can relate to that? How many feel that, gosh, sometimes I'm in a state of contradiction? I want to do good. It's all our original desire to do good. Everybody wants to do good. The fundamental desire and pursuit of man is to do good. Nobody really wants to do evil. Everybody wants to do good. But actually doing good is so difficult. And avoiding evil acts or bad deeds is so difficult. So St. Paul very honestly uses himself as an example of the dilemma of man, that we are in a state of contradiction. A part of us wants to do good. That's the original part of us, our original desire. We want to do good. We want to be on the side of goodness. We want to relate to God. We want to do good deeds. But there's another part of us, a sinful mind, that causes us to do bad deeds, or it leads us into sin. And these two directions are at war inside of us. And I know if you're really honest with yourself, you'll admit, yes, this is really going on. There's a war going on inside of me. When I'm doing something bad, there's a voice in there saying, you shouldn't be doing that. Don't do that. And I have to fight against my original desire sometimes to sin. And then on the other side, when we want to do something good, there seems to be another part of us that's saying, oh, come on. Don't do that. That's silly. People will think you're silly, or you'll be embarrassed. Don't do that. Don't do something good. Think of yourself. Think of yourself. So it seems like we're two people, doesn't it? Seems like we're two people. And actually, it's a result of our lineage and our ancestry. We've studied many times that the lineage of man is confused. Right from the very beginning, God told Adam and Eve to be fruitful, multiply, and have dominion. Make the kingdom of heaven. But they failed. They instead sinned and multiplied sin. So we can see that man's lineage is a confusion of good and evil. There's an original part of us that seeks to fulfill the ideal of God, but there's also an inherited part of us that we've received from our first ancestors, Adam and Eve, who fell, who sinned. So this conflict, the cause of all war is from the war going on inside of us, each one of us. So the most obvious manifestation of this war going on is the feeling of midway position. I'm in a midway position, or neutrality. Neutrality. When two forces are working against each other in an opposite way, the result is zero. And haven't you felt like that sometimes? Usually the ideal for us these days is, I'm okay as long as I'm feeling no pain, right? But that's not good enough. That's not the way that God wanted us to live. How you doing today? Yeah, I'm all right. Everything's okay. No problem. That's the ideal of this world, right? If I ain't feeling no pain, I'll take it. But how neutral we are. Haven't you noticed how neutral people are? So hard to commit, so hard to share your heart, so hard to love. We're really stuck in a midway position, and it's hard to commit. It's hard to really be a loving person. It's hard to do good things. It's safe just to be in our little safe zone, right? Like in our spiritual armored vehicle. We live in a spiritual armored vehicle and nobody gets in, nobody touches me. Okay, maybe I'm not happy, but at least I'm safe. I'll take it. Have you ever ridden the bus home, or been on a train, or been on a bus trip, and you can sit in the seat right next to somebody, and how hard it is for people to really share with each other, to talk? Or if you've ever been on the subway in New York City at rush hour, it's unbelievable. You can be pressed up against people, but it seems like there's a law written that says you can't look at anybody. Nobody talks. You're smashed together up against people, but nobody dares talk. That breaks the rules. You'll be arrested. So we live in this protected shell, the neutral area. And maybe we're not happy, but at least we're safe, right? Nobody's going to hurt me. I'm protected. You'll never be happy that way. And God never intended us to live in a midway position. So we got to come out of there. And there's only one way. If we want a relationship with God, there's only one way to start it. And that is, you got to surrender. You got to surrender to God. And then you got to act. The name of this program is Word and Deed. It's not good enough just to hear good things. You got to do good things. What did Jesus say? He said, knock and the door will be open. But we would prefer if the door would open and then we'll knock. Ask and it will be answered. In other words, we've got to do something. We've got to do something first, and then God can connect to us. So to come close to God, you got to get up and you got to do something. You got to do a good deed. Why do we have to do a good deed to connect to God? Because God is a man who lives for the sake of goodness, doing good things for the sake of others. So if we want to relate to this God, if we want to find this God, then we got to make ourselves similar to him. We have to make a common base. A common base. Who are the people that you like the most? It's the one that you have a common base with. Haven't you noticed that your friends are the people that have a common base with you? Or have you ever noticed that whenever there's a disaster, or whenever it snows, or whenever there's a common problem, people unite together? We need a common base in order for there to be relationship. When there's no common base, it's hard to relate, isn't it? Very hard to relate. So, same thing. When we want to relate to God, We got to make a common base inside of ourselves. And that's why we have to do good deeds. That means, what's a good deed? What's a good deed? A good deed is any thought or action in accordance with God's principle that makes a base for God to have give and take with me. In other words, it's the opposite of sin. So what happens when we make a common base with God? Then relationship can take place. God can intervene in my life. God can have give and take with me. And what's the result of that? That means we come closer together. God comes closer to me, and I come closer to God. And you know what that means? That means I become more like God wants me to be. And you know who that is? That's your true self. When you become more like the way God wants you to be, then that means you're becoming your true self, your true personality, your true unique self. Coming closer to God means I come closer to myself as well, my true self. But we got to do something. Make a base for God to have give and take with you. Don't wait for God to come down. Hey, God, come down here. Let me see a burning bush, and then I'll believe. It'll never happen. You have got to knock. You have got to ask. You have got to seek. Do something. Do something good. Do something unselfish for somebody else. It doesn't have to be a big thing. You don't have to save the world. Do something little. Like make somebody a cup of coffee. You know, Jesus emphasized the little things. There was a woman who gave some money in the temple. It was just a couple pennies. But it was all that she had. He really praised her. She gave the most. Jesus also emphasized doing good things to people that are doing bad things to you. Ooh, that's hard, isn't it? That's a good kind of good deed to do. Jesus said, pray for the one that is doing evil to you. Don't just pray for your brothers. Pray for your family. Pray for the ones that are out to do harm to you. Isn't that tough? To do something good to somebody who's doing something bad to you? Oh, that's so difficult. But if you do that, you'll really make a base for God to have give and take with you. That means you'll become more God-like, and God will become more you-like. That means you'll come together. God will become very real. You'll feel God very much in your life. Do good things. Don't have to be big things, but let's make a base for God to have give and take with me. Now, unfortunately, this lecture doesn't end here because sometimes we're going in the other direction, aren't we? Sometimes we're following the pursuit of our sinful mind, this sinful self that Paul talked about. Sometimes this sinful side is influencing us. And always, 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 this sinful side will follow this basic principle. That is, sacrifice others for yourself. The self. The self is the king of the sinful mind. And the sinful mind motivates us to do bad deeds or sin. Sin. What is sin? Sin is any thought or action in violation of God's way that makes a base for Satan to have give and take with me. Satan. And the same thing, when we have give and take with Satan, Satan invades, and then we become more like him. That means through sin, your personality will transform. That's why you shouldn't sin. Sin corrupts your personality. Sin corrupts your true self. That's why we shouldn't sin. So what is the tradition? How can we distinguish this sinful mind? This sinful mind will always motivate you by self-interest. Self-interest? Self-interest is really in our mind and in our heart. Have you ever noticed how you'll become so righteous about something that involves your own self-interest? Have you ever watched people on a strike? They're so righteous. They're so righteous and so strong. Because their self-interests are involved. But are they that powerful, that energetic about even the greater unrighteous in the world? For instance, there are people enslaved by communism around the world. Can we get those same people on strike to march against communism? A much greater unrighteousness? No, not this weekend. I'm going to the ball game. Self-interest. That's a part of our sinful mind. Got to get it out of ourselves. Another thing, our sinful mind will motivate us by self-glorification. I'm so great. You know, arrogance. Self-pride and arrogance. I'm so great. God, I'm great. Or, well, I've only made one mistake in my whole life. For a couple of minutes, I thought I was wrong. Have you ever met people like that? Oh, there's so much sin that comes out of the self-glorification. Another one, self-gratification. Make myself happy. Self-pleasure. Immorality. If it makes me feel good, do it. You remember that standard of morality? If it feels good, do it. Boy. If it feels good, do it. Self-gratification. That'll lead you to hell. That'll lead you to hell. And self-justification. Self-justification. That's another one. Hey, you shouldn't be doing that. That's wrong. Hey, you can't say that to me. And who are you? Oh, I'm tired, or I'm weak, or, well, it's only the first time I've ever done it. We're always justifying ourselves, right? Well, once won't hurt. Oh, everybody's doing it. Self-justification. Leads us to evil deeds, bad deeds, sin. And the result of sin is the same thing. We become more like Satan's personality, and he becomes more like us. Our personality is warped, becomes warped by sin. And our hearts, our true mind, can't move. And that means selfishness becomes a way of life. Selfishness becomes a way of life. Then, you don't really have a choice anymore. You are dominated by selfishness. And when you are living for yourself, then that's all that you'll ever have is yourself. And when you go into the next world, you'll go to the world of self. And you know what's in the world of self? Just you. Just you. Now, you know what they call that in prison? Solitary confinement. And that's the worst kind of punishment in the world, solitary confinement. Even the most hardened criminal trembles at the prospects of solitary confinement. So let's change that. Let's don't follow this sinful mind. Let's don't do sin. Let's not live for self-interest, self-glorification, self-gratification, self-justification. Let's instead follow our original desire, which is in every one of you, and let's do goodness. Let's sacrifice ourselves for the sake of others, and let's make a base for God to have give and take with me, and let's liberate our true self. And let our true personality blossom. That's God's hope for us. Thank you very much, and God bless you.
Interesting. Well, the average person will reply, including the average church member, that it's the doctrine of the fall and the doctrine of restoration which the church has, which interested them most and perhaps first affected them profoundly. My own feeling is that the doctrine of God is the most interesting. It's a modern doctrine because God suffers, God weeps. The notion of God as a suffering God is very much in this. So God works through human instrumentation. He is constantly pained by the condition of the world, and is working through human instrumentation to try to restore the original fall. So the notion of God is, I think, somewhat novel, but also quite congenial to the modern temperament that others have been working toward. It's not a classical notion of God at all in the sense of the unmoved, eternal spirit. It may very well be closer to the biblical image, because I once said to someone who's high in the church, "Where did Reverend Moon get his sources?" And he snapped back at me, "The Bible and prayer." And it fits the background of the religious situation at the time here, that one studied the Bible very closely, and one prayed a great deal over the interpretation. I once, this has interested me because I think some of the things I've been interested in the doctrine of God for maybe 50 years or modestly 40, because I thought that there's some things wrong in the present situation and most people's perception of God. So this interested me because it's a revisionist view, but I think it's a very biblical view. One person who didn't like my things on God snapped at me, "Fred, you have a very biblical notion of God," and this was meant as a critical comment that it wasn't sophisticated enough. And so I think the God who emerges in the divine principle is a very human spirit.
이 때문에 타락함으로 말미암아 인류의 시절은 절망의 주체로서의 결과되게 되었다.
So because of the fall of the original top ancestors of the mankind, the human history has been running on the side of despair. The man has been living in despair.
자, 그러한 사람을 버릴 수 있는 이런 입장에 있는 하나님이 아니다. 원래는 하나님은 아버지고 인간은 인류는 자녀의 입장에 있기 때문에 부자지 관계의 입장에 있다.
However, even after the fall of man, God could not be put himself in a position to abandon man. Why? Because originally God created man as children of God. And God was supposed to be in a father's position. Father-son relationship was the original concept and ideal of creation. Therefore, even after the fall, God cannot abandon man.
결과가 어떻게 됐나 하나님으로 보게 되면 차라리 죽어버렸으면, 차라리 없어졌으면 다시 만들 수 있는데.
However, from the side of God, if that Adam and Eve were totally demolished, non-existent, just vanished, then God can recreate them.
둘이 벼랑에 둘이 안고 떨어져서 죽었으면 말이야. 그것도 다시 만들 수 있다.
And let's say they fell down from the ditch and drowned in the water and just vanished. Then God has a reason to recreate them.
그것이 아니라.
However,
사람이 있는데 근본이 잘못됐다.
However, that was not the case. They were still alive, physically maintaining their biological life. But then the origin or original life was gone. And
무엇에서 떨어졌는 얘기야? 무엇에서 떨어졌는 얘기야?
And what was that fall? Where did they fall? They fell.
딴 것 같은 거 마음대로 이것을 우리 인간의 힘으로 대처할 수 있는 것 같으면 말이야. 우리가 걱정도 할 필요 없다고.
If that the kind of thing lost by the action of fall can be replaced, then we can go out and get the spare part or whatever, replace it.
또 하나님이 그 마음대로 대처할 수 있는 것 같으면은 문제가 안 된다.
Or God can replace that particular part which went wrong, then God should not be worried. There's no problem then.
하나밖에 없는 한 번밖에 첫 것으로 시작해서 영원히 하나라서 남아지 할 하나님에게도 귀한 것이요 인간에게도 귀한 사랑을 중심 삼고 파산이 됐다.
But then that fall was not that kind of material loss. That was the loss of heart. Very core truth of entire creation, love. In other words, genuine, pure, original love was entangled in the action of fall. That was the problem.
자, 그러려면 아담과 서로 기쁜 가운데, 최고로 기쁜 가운데 최고의 생명력이 발휘하고 최고의 모든 힘이 함하고 모든 전체의 이상력까지 다 합해가지고 거기에 사랑의 꽃이 피어야 된다 그 말이야.
In other words, that love by which God wanted to have Adam and Eve blossom in the ideal, to blossom into their whole fulfillment of joy. In other words, every creation was hinged upon the fulfillment of that love, and that very love was hurt or lost.
그래서 그 꽃과 같이 피어가지고 그 향기가 온 천하를 덮고 나올 수 있고 그 꽃을 바라보고 향기를 맡는 하나님은 스스로 거기 취할 수 있는 사랑을 꿈꿨던 것이다.
God has been dreaming the blossom of this one beautiful flowers of love, the blossom by Adam and Eve, where the fragrance is fulfilled, full of the earth, and the joy is abound. Under that kind of situation, God wanted to receive His joy and glory. That was the dream of God.
자, 그러한 이상적 사랑의 꽃이 피어가지고 향기를 풍길 수 있는 그 자리에 있어서 인간과 완전히 하나님과 하나 되고 뗄래야 뗄 수 없는 사랑의 통합체가 결실이 맺어져야 돼, 결실이.
So God intended to have the total unity between God and man in love, so that there is no boundary between God and man, all in one entity, and totally united together, and rejoice together, happy together, and live together. That was the kind of life God planned with man.
그래서 아담 해와에게 있어서의 사랑의 열매가 맺혀야 된다. 열매.
So therefore, God has been waiting to have Adam and Eve to bear fruit of love.
그러나 오늘날 땅에 살고 있는 사람은 오늘날 정상적인 하나님의 뜻 가운데 살아가지고 하나님의 뜻을 이룬 자리에 서 있는 것이 아니라 타락한 자리에 있다는 사실을 우리나라에.
But we also must realize the people and the men and women here on earth are not in that level of right footing or level of perfection. They are in a fallen situation. They departed. They separated from the original, the standard that God established.
자, 그러면 하나님으로 볼 때 제일 충격적인 문제, 제일 비통한 문제가 뭐냐면 타락했던 거.
So from the standpoint of God, the most heartbreaking thing is indeed the fall of man. Man departed, separated from his original standard.
자, 하나님이 그렇게 느끼는 반면 인간은 내가 타락된 나로서의 얼마나 비참하다는 거야. 얼마나 비참하다는 걸 느껴야 할 텐데 일반 이 땅에 사는 사람은 내가 타락되어 있다는 사실도 모르고 비참하다는 사실도 모르고 있다.
But another tragic situation is this. Then God knows the heartbreaking situation that is the fall of man. But men themselves do not realize how much they have fallen. Even they do not recognize the pain of fall or the anguish and those significant of fall. They do not realize even. They're numb. That is even greater problem.
일반 종교들도 마찬가지지만 특히 이 통일교 교인들 타락했다고 하더라. 그죠? 타락했다고 하더라. 일반 종교들도 물론 기독교인들도 타락했다고 믿고 있지만 우리 통일교인들도 그걸 타락했다고 하더라. 그 실감이 난다.
Well, all religion is talking about the fall of man, but by passing, there's no real seriousness. Even in the Unification Church, we talk about fall of man, even more significant degree. But still, really, it did not really come to a bones yet.
여러분 타락됐다고 느껴?
Do you feel we've been descendants of the fall of man, fallen generation? Do you feel that to the bone?
자, 타락한 아담 해와 그때에 있어서 아담 해와가 쫓겨날 때 그때의 두려움과 그때의 그 심각한 그 장면하고 오늘날 이 지금 수천 년 역사를 거쳐가지고 타락된 오늘 우리 후손들하고 누가 더 심각해야 되겠느냐? 더 심각해야 되겠느냐?
Now, just think about the sight that Adam and Eve were fallen, and that serious moment they really chased out from the Garden of Eden. Now we are sitting here today as a descendant after many thousands, even millions of years probably after that occurred in the Garden of Eden. Then which side should be more serious about the fall? Adam and Eve or ourselves?
여러분들이 ourself라는 말은 하지만 그 얼마나 심각하니? 얼마나 타락권 내에 자기 자체가 있는 것을 이 벗어나지 않으면 해방받지 않으면 이 문제를 생각하고 얼마나 심각하느냐는 문제가 이 문제입니다.
So some of you answer that ourselves, we should feel the seriousness. But the important thing is you say it one way, one thing, saying it one thing, but how much you feel the bones or feel to your heart. How much we really feel that pain.
자, 그 차이, 하나님과 우리 사이의 그 차이가 얼마나 크냐, 이것을 어떻게 면하는 것이, 이것이 종교가 하리요 종교 생활 하는 모든 신앙생활 하는 사람들이 해야 할 문제다.
So there we recognize the gap between God's pain and a man's pain. What the same occurrences of the fall of man centering upon that event, God feels the real pain, men do not feel the real pain. There's a gap. And the religious goal or purpose of the religion is close the gap.
그것이 역사를 통한 수많은 종교와 수많은 종교의 참되온 종교의 길을 가자는 그런 사람을 통해서 그 갭을 어떻게 메워가지고 하나님과 같은 그런 자리에 느낌을 느껴가지고 그걸 해방받으려 하는 자리에 나가니 하는 것이 이것이 뭐 중요한 종교로서 가야 할 중요한 목적이라는 걸 여러분 알아야 돼요.
Throughout history, the purpose of the religion is to close the gap. God constantly erecting his champion or his messenger or his prophet to come to this earth, educate the people, close up the gap so that men and God should feel the one feeling, same joy, same pain. That was the goal of the religion.
자, 하나님 편으로 보게 되면 이 갭을 메워서 수많은 개인과 수많은 가정과 수많은 민족과 수많은 세계 역사를 통해서 희생의 대가를 치러야 얼마나 크게 희생을 치러가느냐 하는 것을.
For this purpose, God has been paying great deal of price, great deal of sacrifice, in terms of men and women, in terms of many families, many tens of thousands of people, even millions of people. You know, God has been paying the price for this.
자, 그러면 이 복귀 역사는 그러면 이거 어떠한 병이 난다는 걸 여러분 알아요. 어떠한 이 타락의 이 악의 요소를 받게 되느냐 하는 문제.
So in the cause of restoration, most important and key step or first step or fundamental step must be to have proper diagnosis. We must come to a clear understanding what went wrong, what disease we do have, what kind of sin have we committed.
넘쳐면 나라는 것이 나라는 것이 자기라는 게 이렇게 생겨납니다.
In the fall of man, the most incredible consequences. First consequence would be has been that the appearance, emergence of self, pushing his own self into a center stream.
자기를 중심하고 모든 것을 자기.
So therefore, after the fall of man, everything becomes self-centered. The center, always occupied by me, I, always the biggest letter. After the fall.
그것이 여러분의 드리백했던 여러분의 모든 세포에 드리백했다.
Today, in every cell of the people here in this room, it is true that particular stigma, that particular essence is infiltrated into every cell of our body. In other words, we have been contaminated, we have been polluted by that self-centered feeling.
그 다음엔 뭐냐? 그 다음엔 소유욕. 내 것 만들 같다. 내 것 만들자.
Second, what is the consequence of the fall? Second, that is that people want to make everything to become their own. In other words, they want to own, they want to harbor the power, they want to crave after the power, they want to keep the control. This greediness.
그 다음엔 뭐냐?
Number three, what is the consequence of the fall?
거짓 사랑의 혈통을 받.
거짓 사랑의
사랑의 혈통을 받은 거짓 사랑의
And
혈통.
thirdly, the fall of man brought the fake it, or the untrue, or this is fake it, untrue, or the lineage. It come the fallen, we must say satanic. It's untrue, disguise, and the false lineage that came to us. That was the consequence of the fall.
원수의 피를 받은 원수의 피를.
The two steps go further. We are born in the lineage of our enemy. We're receiving the bloodstream that's coming from our enemy.
자, 그렇기 때문에 내 자체에는 사탄의 피가 들어있다.
So in my bloodstream, there is the blood of Satan is running.
그다음에 사탄의 서유욕이 들어있다. 서유욕.
And also in my bloodstream, there was satanic greediness, who want to possess something, just to take it as mine. That blood is running in my.
그러면 사탄이 들어있다. 자기 중심 삼는 사탄이 들어있다.
And thirdly, in my bloodstream, that Satan itself is dwelling. In other words, that Satan means, Father is saying, self-centeredness. Self-centered feeling is running into my body.
이걸 보게 되면 나라는 감투 가운데 사탄의 사랑과 사탄의 욕심과 사탄 자체가 나를 감투 쓰고 있다 이렇게 생각합니다.
So, in other words, I am, in a way, son of Satan. Inside, it's been all corrupted by satanic essence, satanic greediness, satanic lineage, and satanic self-centeredness. And I'm sort of like a facade of Satan.
그 무슨 말이겠어?
Do you follow?
여기서 이 사탄을 뽑아내. 사탄의 핏줄을 뽑아내고 사탄의 욕망을 뽑아내고 사탄 자신의 자기 중에 셀프 센터적인 이 사탄 요소를 빼버려.
So our job is to remove from us, from our body, from our bloodstream, the satanic element, satanic self-centeredness, satanic greediness, satanic lineage. Pull it out, separate it. That is our job today.
Okay, but doesn't it take years for that to
Welcome, everybody. I have a question for you tonight. Where do you go when you die?